Hi there. Good evening to you all. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to the second Fireside Chat brought to you by the Order of Bards, OBODs and Druids. And in these sessions, I'm in conversation with members of the Order who may not be very well known. And I am absolutely fascinated with their stories, as I'm sure you will be. But first of all, I would like to send you some blessings. Banachti Umlan Yali. That is in Irish, the blessings of the full moon. And today is the 1st of October, and Jerafor is the word for October in Irish, and it means the end of the harvest. So we have one more month, according to Irish tradition, of harvesting. So gather around the fire. I have it nicely lit, and hopefully we'll have no technology problems this year, this week. Hi, Mervyn. Hi, Gabby. Ellie, how are you? Julie Barkham. Luna Fireoak, Linda from Cairns, from Australia. Welcome, Julia from London. Welcome, all of you. And now I'm going to introduce my mystery guest for this evening. I'd like you to welcome Peter Cawston, who is from Glasgow. And welcome, Peter. And just checking to see if a few more people are coming. Good evening from Bavaria. Somebody saying hello, Peters. Lisa Wheeler from England. Donna, Paul Jackson. Welcome, Montana. Brilliant. Taiwan. Oh my goodness. You're very, very welcome. North Carolina, Jerry. Great. Wonderful. Anyway, and Pat has come back for more listening this time from Ulster. Welcome, Pat. And thank you so much for a wonderful interview last week. So, Peter, when we get started, I know you as long as I know Pat, actually. We met again at 6 years ago at Caimabon and at the retreat there. And I think my memory of you is that you walked from the train station barefoot. Is that right?
It wasn't barefoot. No, I arrived barefoot.
Okay.
It was about a 10-mile walk, I think. Yeah. But I was barefoot when I arrived. Yes, I remember walking down, and almost the first people I saw were you and Howard, and you just fulfilled all my images of what what Druids look like. I thought, I know I've arrived at the right place.
Wonderful.
I think you had a green kind of elf-like dress or woodland dress type thing, and Howard had a flowing white beard and a kilt on. In your, I thought, I think these must be the Druids.
Hired for the weekend, and that was a wonderful time too.
Yeah.
So, just to ask you a little bit about yourself. So, just a little bit about background. So, what you do for a living? Because I know what you do, but I'd like other people to know who Peter Cawston is.
Okay. So I live in Glasgow in Scotland. I have a little family. I'm married. I've got two boys, one of whom is in third year at university and the other one in his last year at secondary school. And I work as a GP. So I've worked as a GP in a housing suburb in Glasgow for 20 years now. I started there just the month that my older son was born. So in fact, 21 years now.
Oh, congratulations. I remember you, okay, so why Druidry, or what is it that has drawn you to this path?
Gosh. It's a really long story, but I think that's okay.
Whole night.
I think I come from a Christian background, and there was a long period within that where I was exploring a kind of broader spirituality, and especially kind of nature-based kind of spirituality within that kind of frame. So I own a community. I and Celtic spirituality, silent prayer. So that was the kind of journey within that. And I guess as I moved away from that, the kind of sort of deepest levels of me, I felt a connection with the earth, a connection with trees, especially. And for a little while, I was doing an annual kind of retreat of my own, so a retreat on my own, where I'd go and just walk in a wood or something and camp. Or I went to a silent retreat with the Cayley D, who are based up in Scotland near where I am. So they were all kind of staging posts. And then I started listening to Druidcast and liking the chat that I heard on that. So for a while, I kind of wondered whether that would become sort of part of my spirituality. I mean, I've been observing the seasons, you know, and the festivals in my own way for a very long time, well before I went into kind of discovered OBOD. And when my boys were little, I would, you know, sing to them at night about the moon and kind of all kinds of stuff, make up all. I had a tree ogam kind of song that helped me to remember the trees that I'd sang to them. So it just more and more became part of kind of who I was. So kind of deciding to follow the Bardic course of OBOD back in 2013, it just kind of grew out of that, I suppose. It wasn't a kind of becoming a druid as such. It was just another part of who I was and what seemed kind of natural to me. And it's, yeah, so I've enjoyed following that ever since.
Wonderful. So you said, you know, it wasn't the aim to become a druid. Do you see yourself as a druid? Regardless of the grade you're in?
Yes, I do, but not as a kind of defining characteristic. I think when I was brought up as my parents were Christian missionaries, and Christianity was a very defining identity. It was very much a kind of them and us almost. So you were either a Christian or a non-Christian. I mean, it's got no resemblance to that for me now. So it's kind of part of who I am, I suppose, in the same way as I might say I'm a dad or I'm a GP. It doesn't define me as such. It's just a kind of element of who I am, which is positive and which, you know, I embrace, but it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, because it's is druidry something you are or something you do? Or I mean, you work that one out for yourself?
Well, that's right. I mean, as a dad, something you are, something you do. You know, it's a role that you go into. You never kind of lose. There is an identity. I think at the same time, it's an identity that's kind of built up over the years and it changes. And what it means is very different. So for me, being a dad now is completely different than it was when the boys were little. You know, and what I have to do and the way I do it and how I feel about it has changed. But, it's still just an aspect of who I am. So, yeah, it's both.
So when you say that you see that, what you do as a dad now is different to what you did as a dad when the boys were younger. Have you noticed since you joined the order and started on the Bardic grade, do you find there's a difference between what you do now and what you did then?
Yes, I think so.
How you are now and how you were then?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I've kind of got better or got wiser or anything like that. Probably a bit more foolish. I think I had quite a lot of stuff to work out about feelings and anxieties around kind of perhaps from my upbringing and so on. So the sort of transition into it, and for quite a long time, so I think perhaps one of the biggest things for me has been perhaps just owning it more and making it more integrated. And I feel like there's always work to do to kind of stitch it into my life, because I think our lives are just all this kind of mess of stuff, and it doesn't all ever fit together that well, but it's always trying to kind of integrate it and make it more and more part of life, I suppose. So that's perhaps what's changed most over the time.
You mentioned stitching, well, great. I'm sure you're good at suturing, but
No.
What registered with me was it's almost like a tapestry that we're weaving a tapestry. It does fray, and then there's new colors and new designs and new patterns that that emerge and need to be integrated. And that can be a really interesting process, or it can be a challenging one.
Yeah, my suturing is horrifying, and the worst time of my life was a junior doctor in the obstetrics ward.
Oh dear.
Traveling on the train, practicing stitching up an orange, thinking I may ruin someone's life forever tonight.
Did you?
I think not. I hope not. I think for me, it's a bit like a compost bin, right? I think the closest I've got to kind of magic cauldron is my compost bin, and it feels like a cauldron. I kind of, when I put things into it, it's very intentional. I spend a long time chopping things up and turning it around, and I've got little blessings over the compost bin, and I wish everything that goes into it a kind of new life. And it feels like Drury is a bit like that. It's all these things I keep putting into it. And then when you spread it out over the garden, it kind of, everything in the garden gets influenced by it. But I wouldn't say I live in a compost heap. You know what I mean? So I feel like Drury is a bit like the compost that kind of has definitely really enriched the garden and brought particular flavor to it and so on. And it's got all these things that gone into it. So for me, it feels, and it's always messy. It's always churning around. It's always new things going in, but it just brings this kind of enriching kind of level to my life, which I think has been a lovely kind of aspect of it.
I love the analogy of the compost, because it took me, when I first heard about compost, that you put vegetable clippings or whatever, garden clippings in, and it becomes the soil. I thought, no, it can't. I can't see how that can possibly happen. I have a compost heap and I have a compost loo, and it's amazing what I offer to my compost loo, and how it says magic. It becomes really, really beautiful, rich soil, and what it's lovely is that there's lots of imperfection. It isn't about purity. It's all about diversity and having as much as you can. And I think Druidry allows that diversity, and the order, which I love about it, has so much diversity. And that richness, there's nothing clean or pure about it. But look at what we create.
Yeah, and it's all that lovely connection. I think I just love the fact that it all works. Everything, it all connects together. So, the more fungus you can have in your soil, the more connections that has with the roots, the more bacteria. It's like the soil is a whole living entity, and you're kind of feeding that all the time. And I don't have a wonderful garden. I'm not a great gardener, but it really excites me, the thought of just the life that's going on under there, and how intelligent it is, and how the plants bring their intelligence, the soil gives back to the plants, and it drags up the minerals from down below, and you're all kind of feeding into that all the time. And it just feels like that's what I want my life to be like, and I want to just feel like I'm part of something like that.
That's lovely. And you just reminded me of that book you introduced me to, Brilliant Green.
Yes.
Just talk a little bit about that, because you were talking about if aliens came, they would see us going very slowly. We see trees as not doing anything because they move so slowly. Just elaborate on that, because I think that's fascinating.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the whole intelligence of trees and plants, herbs, and fungus. In fact, fungus is even older and even more intelligent and wise. And I sometimes wonder if everything is actually just fungus farming us to feed them. It could be that forests are just funguses grew forests in order to get lots of sugar down into them, and maybe funguses are growing us so that we feed them. But yeah, trees have this wonderful intelligence. The roots just develop these underground connections. I mean, you know, I'm sure it's a well-known thing, but it really excites me. And almost like the older the forest is and the more complex the interconnections, our brains kind of give up after a while. You know, whereas the brain of a forest can go for thousands of years and keep getting wiser and keep getting more intelligent and keep storing those centuries and centuries of knowledge. When I walk around, that fills my head with all these kind of wonderful feelings.
I think do you think that trees are conscious?
Yes, but not humans. That's my view, my personal view. I think it's they are conscious, but not in a human way.
Okay.
For me, I relate to trees and plants as people, and I feel a real connection and a sense of, but I recognize that that's kind of because that's what I need. But from the tree's point of view, it probably sees things a bit differently than the way I see things, and it experiences things differently. And I kind of don't want to force the tree to be like me, because it's way better than me, and it's got a consciousness at a whole different level from what I have. And at the same time, I think being able to relate to as a person like me, I think it helps me and it's good for me, and it's lovely for me to be able to do that. And I love doing that with other people as well. I think it's amazing how that bonds people. I found with patients, actually, I don't talk kind of in particularly spiritual terms, in inverted commas, with patients, but so many people that I talk to have got that sense of somehow connecting to plants and trees and so on. And also with the soil. And I think sometimes talking to people about trees and the soil and what they can do for their own mental health and so on, it's a really bonding thing between people. And it kind of sets aside all your kind of ideologies and views on the world and theories and stuff. I think it really just connects people.
I think you're so right, because I work that way with my own clients, you know, about what does it feel like for them to go to a walk in the woods or being in the garden. And they'll say, you know, how better they feel, how much more relaxed they feel. And then we're talking about something we all know. It is bonding, that there's no expert here, but we all share this because we are nature and we can engage. Sometimes it doesn't matter at what level, but how important that is. And just to come back to that bit about, I think humans can often assume that superiority, you know, that, well, trees aren't conscious beings, only humans are. And I like your idea, you know, it's a different kind of consciousness. It's not an inferior one. It's just different.
No. And I think we paid a big price for having big brains. Our brains consume a huge amount of energy. So we had to develop all kinds of strategies to feed our massive hungry brains. And in a sense, we're destroying the world to try and feed our hungry brains. And in a sense, the trees didn't grow brains like us. And it means they're way more efficient in how they use energy. But we kind of use our brains to make ourselves miserable a lot of the time. So, you know, but yeah, no, I've no doubt that trees are conscious at all.
Well, I know I've felt that. Whether I don't think I'm being anthropomorphic, but when certain times in the woods, the trees will call out to me, and it's not the wind rustling in the leaves, and some trees will, and others won't, and I can sense it. So, I like the idea. Whether it's true or not, it helps me, and it's. I mean, any of our beliefs, as long as they're helpful to us, it doesn't matter whether they're. Well, we find science will back up everything we've always known anyway later on. But in the meantime, let's do what we do. Just what was your first spiritual experience?
Oof. I don't think I probably know, if I'm honest. I think I was brought up within a Christian tradition that really emphasized kind of inner faith and inner kind of belief and giving your heart to Jesus.
Yep.
And that doesn't feel discontinuous for me. I think that's part of being my spiritual experience. So as a child, in a child's kind of way, I had a sense of kind of something along those lines. So I probably couldn't think of my first spiritual experience, to be honest. I've got sort of, yeah, and I'd probably slightly struggle to say what was kind of spiritual and not spiritual, if I'm honest, Eimear.
Because I suppose only any of us can say this was spiritual for me.
Yeah.
And nobody actually, that isn't spiritual. That's something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
I think it's probably experience, our own narrative, I think.
I think perhaps for me, it would be more around what was my first kind of authentically me discovering things as opposed to kind of growing up with things. Yeah. And actually, for me, that probably was as a teenager around kind of social justice and feminism. So I think probably, and it was still within the kind of Christian frame. So kind of things like the book of Isaiah and the kind of prophetic kind of stuff. And that really kind of, I started to kind of internalize that as being, this is what my life's about. I was brought up in Latin America. I was brought up in Peru. And we came to Scotland when I was 14. And I think, I suppose in the years after that, having more and more a sense of kind of inequality and injustice and kind of anger at that and wanting to change that and sort of make that what my life was about. And also there was the role of women within the church that I was part of was very kind of reduced, and there's a sense of anger about that as well, and that kind of, so the kind of, I suppose, taking fairness and justice has been a kind of defining thing about me then. I suppose perhaps that was part of me sort of trying to authentically say, this is my spiritual life, this is what I'm about. Yeah.
And then that gets confirmed within OBOD, you think of the Druids, all of that. And we allow, I suppose we're an order of diversity and inclusivity. And I think the Druids' prayer sums that up beautifully. Okay, so, and maybe this comes in, how do you see yourself in terms of your role as a responsible ancestor?
I think I think about that quite a lot. I think I very much have at one point in, I think it's the ovate lessons, there's this image of the X, and you're the kind of point in the X, and the those that have gone before kind of get wider and wider and wider in terms to kind of really encompass not just all people but all beings that have ever been. And then as it spreads out from you, it gets wider and wider and wider, and you're a kind of point in time at the middle of the X. So for me as an ancestor, there's kind of the immediate, the small part of the X just below me, which is maybe my children and grandchildren and those that might look on me as an ancestor. And then there's kind of just all of life that's going to come after whatever that is. And I think, I suppose, living my life with that sense, just that every decision is kind of colored by that sense that there's this whole flow of life coming after. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how I feel about it all the time.
You've struck me as somebody who has a social conscience. I mean, because I remember you talking about your landscape, this polluted river that you passed,
Yeah.
and how it was. And, you know, so many, we were in Caimavon, and this just beautiful, magical place in Snowdonia with a lake and mountains, and it's the territory of Merlin and all of that. And you were talking about your landscape, and I was really impressed by that. Just say a little bit about that for other people to hear it.
So when I became a GP, for me, it was about working in a community and bringing about change, so I went to work in a community that was very marginalized, a lot of social problems. Actually, a very wonderful community as well. It's been a real privilege working there, and lots of really amazing people. But it was feeling that this was just an outworking of this kind of inner kind of thing inside me. So it's where I walk to work is down this little river called Garscadden Burn. And it is not, I've taken other people on that walk and all they see is the rubbish and the shopping trolley in the river and so on. I call it a river. It's a trickle. But we renamed our practice about 7 or 8 years ago after this trickle, because that's what made the valley. That's what's been given the fertility to the land. That's the goddess. I've paid homage to that river for years and years and years, and stopped and put coins into it and asked for blessings, and because that's the source of the whole valley where this housing scheme is built. And I think just the sense that it's still nature, it's still life, it's still pure and wonderful in all the messiness and all the kind of problems with drugs and all the problems with violence and all the problems with housing and all the stuff that I see every day and all the awful abuse that's gone on. And at the same time, all the amazing people that, bringing up kids and, having wonderful lives. But we're not separate from nature. It's not that somehow you go out to a forest and that's nature. And then I go to a housing estate with rubbish and lots of houses, and that's not nature. That's still nature. And I feel that that's kind of, that's sort of what's driven me along the years. Actually, one of the things, if I can keep talking about that came out of the Bardic grade, and this was about 6 years ago. One of the exercises is you sit with your hands in soil. You're kind of connecting with earth, so at that stage, I was part of something called GPs at the Deep End, and it's the GPs that work in the 100 most deprived practices in Scotland. So we called it the Deep End. So that's been going for about 10 years, trying to campaign for more resources and better healthcare in those areas. So I was part of GPs at the Deep End, and I was doing this soil exercise, and it was kind of chucking it down with rain. So I decided not to sit in the garden. I brought a pot of soil into the house, and I just had my hands in the soil just for ages. And I found an old sunflower seed that must have been in there, right? And I just got this really vivid sense that something was going to grow out of this whole community and wanting to change the community and do more. And actually not long after that, we'd been talking about having link workers, community link workers for GPs, and we'd gone to the Scottish government. And not long after that, we got some funding to have a trial of having link workers in GP practice. So these are people that would help people with social problems and economic problems or housing issues or whatever the problems they were having, to form connections and to link up and to kind of help them to find solutions to these kind of problems. And I was asked to kind of lead on that. And it's like that seed grew and grew and grew. And I had a really vivid sense of that seed. And actually out of that, we got initially seven GP practices doing this, and we got funding to research it and so on. And then just a few years ago, the SNP put in their manifesto commitment they were going to take the link worker program and put it into 250 GP practices in Scotland. So it just kind of exploded. Now that's not all down to me by any stretch of the imagination, but for me, it's just that sense. I suppose that's how I kind of feel Druidry kind of interweaves. It doesn't cause things to happen as such. It's just, for me, it gave me a sense of belief that something was going to grow out of this, and that kind of gave me confidence to kind of go into it and find other people that made it kind of all happen. So I think there's this interweaving between nature, earth, the whole kind of Druidry path, the spiritual path, and just the practical and, my day-to-day life and that kind of sense of trying to make a kind of difference in what you do.
That's so powerful. There's a comment from Pat. I love Peter's ability to see life and nature springing up, even in the places and communities which aren't so picturesque everywhere. That is, everywhere is a sacred site. And then something like this crash, we reap what we sow. Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful example of how Druidry supports you. And again, it's that weaving of magic.
Yeah, I think so.
It's speaking of magic, are you a magician or a mystic, or are you both?
I'd like to be a mystic, but I'm probably more a clumsy magician.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
I just love to be, a kind of contemplative kind of guy that, just watched it all go by and just change the world by doing nothing, and I'm not. I don't kind of stop that much, and my poor little brain is always ticking over on things. And I think I've got better at letting things happen by magic rather than trying to make things happen.
Okay.
But I still always want to talk things into happening rather than stepping back and letting them happen of their own accord.
I think well, you're a doer, and I suppose as a GP, you're a healer, you're there about manipulating. I mean that in the best possible way, as in manipulating dislocated shoulders rather than people for your own ends, but trying to make the world a better place. And I think there's a place for mysticism and contemplation and contemplative people who pray and meditate. I think that's really, really important. And then there's a place for the doers. And
it's bloody annoying though. I've been meditating for 20 years, right? Doing mindfulness stuff for 20 years, and I'm no better at it than I was 20 years ago.
But I know you may not be a great meditator, but certainly you're full of awen or imas because you're a poet.
Yeah.
You are. Say it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll accept that.
I think, would you show some of your magic? Would you share one of your poems?
Okay. Will do. So I have to say, actually, it was going to those retreats at Mabon and afterwards that probably helped me to kind of own kind of poetry in a sense. I think it's a weird thing. I think it's a bit like coming out of the closet. I think lots of people are poets, and it's not always something that's. I think lots of people like me are kind of quite reticent about it, and I think having other people who actually listened to stuff I said, I spoke or wrote, and appreciated it, I think helps to validate that. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, somebody here saying, yes, you are a poet, Peter. And Julia, this is lovely. That makes me feel better about my own miserable meditations.
Yeah.
None of us is perfect, and it's great that,
God, yeah.
I mean, conversations about sharing
Yeah.
how we are rather than presenting some kind of ideal notion of what a druid is. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll let you.
Okay. So, well, this is a kind of winter poem that I wrote a few years ago. That sprang to mind when you asked me to read something. I was going to do the wolf one because I quite like the wolf one that came from the second K-Mab on retreat, but I'll do this one instead. I am perfect. I am perfect, whole and incomplete in myself. With the dark, tangled perfection of a forest, where a brinded chestnut form fruits from the body of a birch, and bright sunlight bites into the cracked bark, crawling along a twisted web to drip from this living, breathless silence, where I nestle in my fallen, cracked, and beautiful perfection.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think somebody might have asked at some of the earlier questions, which grade did you prefer, or which did you find the easiest or the most difficult?
I definitely couldn't say which I preferred. I'm just kind of between grades at the moment, just about to start the Druid kind of thing. I really loved the Bardic grade. It was just an explosion of kind of opening up to myself and I suppose finding my own voice and just allowing myself to be a bit more myself. It was quite a kind of shaking up sort of boof kind of grade, which was very exciting. The ovate grade, the first half of it was quite traumatic for me. And I had some real shit that I that I brought up and created and made worse, and eventually had to face up to. And then I think after that, it was very beautiful and integrating and gentle. And that's where I'm now. So I'm not quite started the Druid grade. So I have no idea which I preferred. I think I prefer where I am now. Having been through some of the shit that I created, and that's in the past. But at the same time, it was all just part of the journey.
And I suppose, and I found this myself too, is that going through the various grades that, well, certainly in OBOD, I can't speak for any other orders, that it's very much, it's a spiritual development path, but it's also very much a personal development path.
Yeah.
It's great when something comes up, or we create our own shit anyway.
Yeah.
That to be able to use the tools or whatever that within the course to be able to push through that and come out the other end, and to be able to say you like where you are now.
Yeah, and to be honest, even sometimes things weren't easy, but at the same time, there's been amazing experiences and beautiful experiences, and really fulfilling and awe-inspiring experiences all along. It's not like things got better. I mean, I think at every stage there's been some really wonderful times, and life's thrown some fantastic experiences as well. I mean, I sail a bit. I've got a little boat on Loch Lomond, and I've got a real reverence for the Cailleach of Loch Lomond, who is quite an awe-inspiring being. And just as I started the kind of ovate grade, I had quite a nasty capsize and just got picked up. It was a beautiful day, and this just wall of weather came down the loch, and just myself and my son just got literally picked up and turned upside down and dumped unceremoniously into freezing cold water. It was just kind of April, so it was kind of ice melt kind of water. And that was quite a kind of, we got fished out. Thankfully, I'm still here. But it was quite a deep spiritual experience to me, actually, and just that real sense of like kind of being put in my place. And actually, just this last summer there, perhaps towards the end of the ovate thing, my son and I went for another sail for a week. We went up to the North End, and we sailed back down in this ridiculous wind. Thankfully, I probably knew a little bit more than I did the first time round. But just seeing the loch, seeing the froth on the water, the wind, the waves churning up on the rocks, just being in the middle of it was just the most amazing experience of just feeling that connection with this place. I've got lots and lots of connections with Loch Lomond and with the islands there and so on. But I think there have been moments like that throughout the kind of the past 7 years that have just felt me really connected to the energy of the water and so on. So there's just always these things coming out of the blue just to just inspire you. And, you know, in that sense, it's not a journey. In that sense, it's just, you never know when the next thing is going to come around the corner and just be amazing.
I think that is so exquisite and so beautiful. Would you say then, in terms of special sacred site to you, that Loch Lomond is would be your favorite?
It's part of the landscape. So what has really developed over the years has been the real deep connections with areas round about Glasgow. So I have a waterfall, which is kind of my sacred grove. It's in a deep crack in the ground, so it's really hidden away. So I can go there and just be on my own, do ritual, bathe in the water, do what I like, and no one sees you. Glasgow's amazing because you can be away from people and on your own within 15 minutes. Wow. Anytime you want. So it's a huge city, and at the same time you can be completely on your own whenever you like. So it's got a bit of both. And then
sorry, there's a countryside very close to the city, you mean?
No, there's two kind of hill ranges nearby, and then beyond the hill ranges you've got the kind of Loch Lomond area, and then you've got the kind of low highlands further north. And it's got this incredible kind of heritage of chambered cairns and standing stones, waterfalls, caves, quite a lot of forests and woods. So I've really spent the years just exploring that, finding places where I've do ritual, form a connection with, learning about some of the kind of, particularly the names of places and what that tells us about the stories behind them. And so Loch Lomond is a kind of liminal space between the kind of Brythonic Welsh-speaking culture of Strathclyde, which Glasgow was part of, and the kind of Dalriadan Gaelic-speaking culture that's kind of the sort of Irish and west of Scotland sort of common culture. So Glasgow's kind of on the boundary between them. So a lot of names in Glasgow are kind of, as I understand it, kind of Welsh or kind of Brythonic kind of origin. So it just feels like you're living on this lovely kind of boundary kind of world. Yeah, and I've used my druidry to learn about it and walk in it and camp in it and sleep in it and sail on it. And yeah.
Somebody says you must visit us in Scotland. I used to go with Howard, you see, and Howard was born in Wales and his mother was from Glasgow and he lived in Dumfries. And so we used to go to Mull and Kilmartin and Iona. Mm-hmm. And magic of Scotland, you know, it's still with me, and I haven't been back in a long time.
Yeah.
So since we've been there, but just actually, we were to do a retreat. We were to organize a road trip, a spiritual road trip, the year of Caimabon. But then when Harry got his council, we didn't, and we went on the retreat. It was magic. So
Yeah.
7 years I was in Scotland.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
hopefully be able to travel again. Someone says, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Glasgow when I visited in 2016. Scotland draws me, but a long way from where I live in the US. That's from Marcia. Yes, and if okay, so Scotland is really, really important to you. Is there any place you'd like to visit that you haven't been to?
I've been to Ireland once, and a wonderful, hospitable place. But I feel that apart from your back garden and the wonderful road trip you took us on, I don't know Ireland at all. So I would like to visit Ireland. And I'd probably like to visit Scandinavia. I've not been to Norway or Sweden or Denmark or Iceland. So
just when you were describing Glasgow being full of you know, court tombs, passage tombs, or whatever, cairns and all of that, and Ireland is very like that. If you take out any ordnance survey map, you'll just see it's full of red dots that indicate this and that richness. And yet I wasn't aware of that when I was growing up, and it's only as an adult and discovering Druidry which has allowed me to explore that further. So yeah. Now, is there anything, I know you say this Druid path has changed your life in many, many ways. Is there any particular Druid teaching that changed you profoundly, or anything that
I think the practices are probably been the most important thing for me. So maybe a couple of things spring to mind. One would be the sort of connecting with your ancestry, and in particular, I went up to some standing stones just kind of north of here, and it's an exercise where you step back into your ancestors' feet and kind of walk in their shoes a bit. So I stepped back into my kind of father and grandfather. I went down the male line this time that I did it. And actually, I found a really profound empathy for the kind of men that have gone before me, and my father's still here, thankfully, and kind of really lost any sense of grievances held, or feeling that I was being judged by them. I think it's easy. I certainly felt I would be judged by my great grandfather, who had set up an iron chapel in Norfolk, and I would see as being a very strict kind of man who would very much disapprove of who I am now. And I think really kind of just trying to see the world through each generation's eyes, and just realizing how just how much we had in common, and how much I am just working out stuff the same way as they were just working out stuff, and being prejudiced sometimes, and getting things badly wrong, and feeling that I was being judged the way they felt they were being judged, and all of that stuff, and just realizing that they were just doing the same as me, and then passing on the best they could to the next generation to make what they could of it. And I found that wonderful, actually. It really gave me a whole different feeling as to my place within the ancestors. And perhaps that goes back to your question about, seeing myself as an ancestor. I think having kind of tried to walk in my ancestors' shoes a little bit.
And I suppose that in that I was coming to that, or how do you honor the ancestors, or have you an idea? I suppose you kind of answered it. I don't know if you want to add to that by even acknowledging their
Yeah.
challenges and recognizing the threads.
I think because to me there's again it's like that X. I think there's the very immediate, I suppose, kind of genealogical ancestors, but they're just a tiny part of the whole kind of world of ancestors of, you know, all the people living and dead that have influenced my life and who I owe so much to, and for good or for ill, you know, or for neither, you know. And I suppose beyond that, you know, we've got the same ancestors as trees and bacteria, you know, mostly the same chemicals floating around in us. You know, most of the serotonin in our brain is created by the bacteria in our guts. You know, we're not different to them. So I think it's something like 3/4 of serotonin is produced by the bacteria in your gut. Something I made that figure up, but
so bugs make us happy.
Yeah. So it's not like we're different things. You know, most of us is bacteria and fungi. You know,
Wonderful.
So just that sense of they're my ancestors too. You know, the bacteria live in my gut that basically decide if I'm going to be happy or sad today. You know, I think they're probably pulling the strings. I've got this sneaking suspicion one day we'll realize they've been pulling the strings all along.
You know, if you eat well, you're happier. And I wonder, if you eat the right food, do you keep the bugs happy too? It's like that they don't want rubbish. They want
Exactly.
nice plants, you know,
Exactly.
a variety of fresh, clean food.
Yeah.
You keep the bugs happy, then they send happy messages upstairs.
That may be just the whole secret to a good life right there, Eimear.
Eat well. Okay. Do you have a personal, I know you said you're a, what did you say, a miserable meditator, but do you have a daily personal practice? Do you pray, for example?
I'll say daily in inverted commas, in that it happens periodically. I wouldn't say every day. Yeah, I do. Yes. So it's a kind of movement meditation that involves walking backwards and then forwards and then turning around and then standing on one leg. And I've got a little kind of thing that I recite about welcoming my past and welcoming my future and the ancestors and the past of the world and the future of the world and welcoming the people in my life and the beings in my life. And then I've got I stand on one leg as a seed, as a sapling, and I've got a little thing that I say around that. And then I do the crane meditation, which I really love. Standing with one eye closed on one leg with one arm behind my back. And I call that, for me, that's the heron meditation. So I try to be a heron. So I try to be a sapling and a heron every day if I can. And it kind of feels like that's what you're living like. One eye's open in this world and, you know, being a GP, prescribing medication, doing health and safety risk assessments, you know, suicide risk assessments, etc., all the practice, organizing flu clinics. And then the other eye is closed and there's this whole other world that's just always flowing there, always living away. And you're kind of standing on one leg, balancing between the two. And it's actually it's not that terrible. I think so that's my way of reminding myself of the things that I value in my life. And if I've got time, I do a kind of do the 4 elements and the spirit as well, just to kind of try and integrate myself. So I do bits of that or all of it.
And that's very simple, you know, and having a simple practice is quite beautiful. And I like how you recognizing the two worlds you live in, that you have and both the inner world and then in your outer world. would you say? What's been your greatest achievement? Like, what are you most proud of?
Probably being a parent, actually. I think there's something pretty special about being at the stage I'm at now, where kind of my boys are kind of young men, and just loving. I mean, there are teenage years have been good, and they're now kind of late teenage, early 20s, and I suppose you just think, wow, it's not an achievement. I mean, they've achieved that despite me rather than because of me, but I still take the credit for it.
I think it's lovely if your children can do well, whatever that means. I'm not talking about, all having PhDs and millions in spite of you.
Exactly. But to me, that's all the achievements happen despite rather than because, you're part of something, and then you have the satisfaction of seeing something good happen. But for example, our one practice of the year a few years ago, and that was like a really good achievement. But once it's achieved, it's gone. It's not like, I think there's not that there's some point in your life where someone comes along and says your life has been, it's all fine, well done, you've succeeded, you've achieved it. Everything you achieve is transitory. And the next year you'll have screwed up, and or it'll be gone, or I think for me, what's been quite helpful the last few years is realizing that there is no one at the end of your life that tells you did it right, well done. It's never going to happen.
And you work that out for yourself.
Yeah.
Speaking of the end, well, we're not going to the end of your life yet, but what is the biggest challenge that you've overcome?
I don't know is the honest answer. I think I don't know if it's a bit like the achievement thing. I'm not sure if life kind of works like that. I think you work through stuff imperfectly, and then you're still there at the end of it. So I think, or you're not. Some things you give up on and leave, and you think, well, that you had to let that go. It's not that you didn't overcome that challenge. It's just that challenge took you somewhere else. So, yeah, I'd find that really hard to answer, if I'm honest.
I think that's important, that when you come across a challenge or whatever it is, and then realize, actually, I need to diverge here. This is not what I'm going to do, or this is not for me. And I think that would be a really hard thing to do, rather than, what's that? Hitting a dead horse, continuing to do something when it's like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
And we talk about psychotherapy. Why continue to do more of the same that doesn't work?
Yeah.
Just deviate, diverge, and go something else. And I mean, I think that's a huge learning.
Yeah.
Do you have any regrets?
Yes. I don't want to. Regrets as in things I would do differently if I'd known what I know now. I don't think and things that I've had to own with others and say, I'm taking ownership that I shouldn't have done that or said that or been like that. But again, it's a bit like the achievements thing. It's almost that possibly is your biggest achievement. Perhaps that is my biggest achievement, is learning to own the stuff that I've got badly wrong. And just learning to own my stuff and say, well, actually, this is just me. I've got to take responsibility for that, and I can't talk my way out of it or justify it or say that actually I'm awful one for trying to make excuses or reason. I'm quite good at kind of reasoning my way around things and say, well, there was a good reason why I was like that, and just having to shut up and say, no, actually there wasn't a good reason, and I just got to own it that I got that wrong. I find that really hard, really, really hard. So maybe that's my biggest achievements, is learning to take responsibility.
But I have a sense that being able to own our flaws and failings and wrongdoings, for want of a better word, I think being able to own that is hugely freeing. Because if you don't own it, you're constantly chasing your own tail. You're constantly running away from it with your justifications, where you can actually fess up and own up. I think that's really, really, I think freeing. Well, for me anyway, to actually admit it. None of us is perfect.
I think it's the flip side for me to the social justice thing that's gone through my life is a little bit kind of being holier than thou and saying, actually, I know better. I'm, this world's a terrible place and I'm going to make it better. And for me, having to strip that away and saying, actually, I'm probably not. And, I'm actually no better than other people. And not having that holier than thou kind of, although I dress it up in very, social justice and all that kind of stuff, I think the last few years especially, I've had to let go of a lot of that and recognize that actually it's just owning the fact that you're no different to anyone else and you're just as, yeah, which is very freeing, actually.
It is, but isn't it a pity that you're not special? No, but it is freeing.
Yeah.
What are you grateful for?
That's like the air that you breathe. I do genuinely feel gratitude, just like the engine that makes your life worth living. I think I'm just walking outside and standing on the grass or looking in the compost bin or, watching squirrels or seeing my family, or to be honest, even going to work. Quite often I just stand there and I feel really grateful. The times when I'm not wanting to throw things and curse at people. So, yeah, I mean, nothing particularly like clever. I think just the same as probably everyone listening in is grateful for. I think just a really deep sense of like the nourishing kind of earth and sky, and like I'm looking out just now and there's Jupiter and Saturn over there. Just out the window, and the full moon's just about to appear over the gable end of the house, and life's just amazing. And you don't have to do anything clever just to go wow.
Absolutely, and notice and pay attention to. And I think we're very, very lucky. And I suppose, I find where I'm living, I'm very, very lucky to be able to look out. And so my window here is north facing, so the moon's over there. But all I can. But to have that and to feel gratitude, because that's what helps us. What helps with me survive. It helped me with grief. All of that, to be able to be grateful for everything I've had. There's magic in it. If you'd had an alternative career or a study path, what would you choose?
For years, I would have said anthropology. Yeah. Just because I find I'd have loved to just immerse myself, particularly in cultures that really understand the earth and are really have practices that are long-term sustainable and transformative, and just trying to see what we can learn from other cultures. Now I'd probably say, when I get struck off for bringing the profession into disrepute, my plan B is to be a gardener.
You still save the world as a gardener. That is brilliant.
Yes. I would just love to just dig compost for the rest of my days and do forest gardening. I'd be absolutely dreadful at it, but I wouldn't care.
Oh, I love it. Just one concern you have for the modern world.
I think the killing species, killing our home, it's because we don't recognize our home as a person. We don't recognize other beings as people, and we think it's okay. Deep down, we think it's somehow okay, and so I'd love to help people see that things have names and personalities and are living beings like them. I think we find it much harder to kill off people that we recognize as being like us, and I think I'd absolutely love in some tiny way to help people to see that. I think we're just destroying, even just in the UK, we're destroying species.
Yep.
Whole species, let alone individual members of those species at a horrifying rate. And that really, that terrifies me and saddens me.
Indeed. Likewise. So that's your concern. So what gives you hope about the modern world?
Lots. I think I'm a huge fan of young people. I think they're so much more sorted than I ever was, than I still am. I mean, my son is the wise counselor in our family. I love the kind of just the knowledge that they have and the self-confidence that so many young people I know have, and even younger patients in the practice. I love how they talk to me, and they're not deferential. They're not kind of, I don't know. Yeah, there's loads. I've got lots of hope, I think. Yeah,
it strikes me when I think of my own two children, how woke they are compared to what I was. And I was compliant and conformist. People think I was wild. I wasn't. I just wanted to be a good girl and never stray. I didn't grow up until my mid-20s. That's when I began to. I didn't rebel because I was too old to rebel at that stage. I just started doing my thing. But when I see integrity and the confidence they have, I go, wow, I'd never have done that. I wouldn't have had the guts to do it. And I always admired people who had guts, but I didn't. And I have guts now, I think. But I think it's lovely to see, younger people having it earlier on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there a person in your life or like an influential person from history that you admire?
Not really, actually. I think that's most influenced me probably has been perhaps writers and poets. I don't know. I love John Clare, for example. What was he, 17th century or early 18th century? I just love his way of looking at the world and just how he was so immersed in like noticing, you can describe a nest with a bird sitting in it. Like I've never seen a bird sitting in a nest. I'm much too kind of clumsy. Whereas he's actually
the mother. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He's actually, so I think, or Jared Manley Hopkins and the way he felt the kind of inside of things, and was able to put that into words. I absolutely love. So I think there's lots of kind of things I read or think about that have kind of, I really admire. I wouldn't say there's an individual in history that I probably, Pat had a great answer last week. She had one up her sleeve when I saw that. I thought, well done, Pat. And I racked my brain, and then I thought, you know what? I'd just been making one up for the sake of looking impressive, so I'm not going to, because by this stage I'll not be looking impressive anyway. So there's no point.
Some wonderful comments about you. Somebody, I need to read it. Somebody loves John Clare too. Okay. Where is it? What a wonderful conversation. The OBOD family is so beautiful. Proud to be a part. And Peter is a fabulous example to us. So great to see deep honesty. It can be difficult for many to own their own baggage. Going within is it is freeing. So there you are. There's some lovely comments. What a lovely, genuine human being. So there you are. You're going to have to accept that.
You know what? That's actually, when I first started in the area that I'm working in now, I was very kind of radical and kind of socialistically and stuff. And we had this action research program, and we did some action research into kind of what health services were like and so on. And we had this lovely thing where we had these discussion groups, and we transcribed what they said and wrote down all their words, and then had a kind of research project. But the research team were people that lived in the area. And in fact, one of the research group was learning to read, and she was using the transcripts of what had been written down in order to learn to read. She was taking them to her English teacher, and she's learning to read so that she could contribute to our little research thing. And one of the words that they used was genuine, and genuine had a whole depth of meaning to it. So I very much appreciate someone saying about being genuine, because they were asking about a doctor could either be cheeky or genuine, and from the sound of it, they said exactly the same thing. The two stories of the doctor telling someone off for smoking. One doctor was being cheeky, and the other doctor was being genuine, and they both said exactly the same bloody thing. And it was where it came from. And I think for them, that was what they looked for, was kind of genuineness. So I think that's what the kind of, for me, real spirituality is about, trying to access that genuine part of you. And that, yeah, anyway, I'll shut up.
Hey, when and why would you fight?
I think I'm too much of a coward. I would probably run away. I think fight and flight is definitely on the flight side for me. I'd be very brave about talking about something, saying how cross I was, but if it came down to fighting, I'm quite a coward.
Or are you a pacifist?
Yeah. I mean, I genuinely, I'm actually okay with conflict. I think I'm certainly at work, I've been in a lot of conflict. And to be fair, I've been threatened by patients, and I've been in, physically situations where I felt threatened. So I do like to kind of, I'm not afraid of conflict as such. I think conflict's really important, and trying to avoid conflict's pointless. And so I like to resolve conflict, or to stand my ground in terms of verbally. To be honest, there's not that, I think as a society, we're not that physically violent. I mean, I've witnessed physical violence, but it's not that common. So, but conflict's everywhere. And I think not avoiding conflict is quite hard, and I don't like it. It makes you feel all churned up inside, but at the same time, particularly with work, it's very much part of my work. And I think learning to be, and also to kind of see where the other person's coming from. I think having people really, we've had a few, when someone dies and a family blame you or are really angry with you, or learning to not see that as conflict, and just try and really step back and say, well, look, if I have done something wrong, I want to learn what I did wrong so that I can change it. And if I haven't, I want to accept where you're coming from in terms of the rage that you're feeling and so on. So that's hard, and I'm not terribly good at it, but I'm definitely trying to learn to kind of approach conflict at quite a distance, as if I'm engaged in it, but also step back from it and watching it happen.
There's also this thing about choosing your battles, knowing
Absolutely.
when either verbally fight or whatever, and when to walk away.
Yeah.
And again, a gift to be able to see what's behind the anger and the pain.
Yeah.
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 Giving you jip, and so much of that is just grief, pain, sadness, sorrow, and get expressed. Someone has to be blamed, and you're in the fire.
I think working in the NHS for 20 years or more now, I think you definitely carry a lot of rage at a lot of the injustices and a lot of the way things are done, and battles that I've fought kind of like Don Quixote type thing, just tilting at windmills. And I've definitely been aware that there's a kind of quite a lot of accumulated years of probably almost trauma from working in the NHS. And so you're right, I'm definitely more kind of thoughtful as to what battles I engage in. But I still quite enjoy a good Barney.
Okay, I'm just thinking just of this image of, that pot of soil and putting your hands in, and just that cleansing, healing piece, and then finding the magic seed. Because I've found when I'm angry and upset about something, going into the garden and weeding. And I'm weeding in a way, but I'm clearing shit out of the way, and I'm going to pick this, and I find taking stress and pain away, and there's something about that connection with the earth. And then I read, maybe in the last year, that the earth has some bugs. Now, I don't know whether they're fungi, bacteria, that actually you absorb through your skin and help manage anxiety.
Wow.
I don't think, and I thought, I get that. I know that. I don't need science to tell me that, but actually, when I have my hands in the earth, it's just.
Absolutely.
I hate conflict, but I've known in relationships where I've avoided it, in order to protect the relationship ended anyway. The healthy thing is to, obviously, if the relationship is important, to engage, to confront the issue rather than avoid it. But I still find that, because I like to be nice and polite, and I'm not polite, but this is my. So, what's your favorite song?
My favorite song?
Yeah.
I really hate favorite questions.
Because I've 20 of
them. Because my mind instantly goes blank. So, yeah. Actually, I really love the Waterboys, and one of my favorite albums is The Evening with Mr. Yeats. Yeah, so is it an evening or can't remember. But so there's a song I love in there, which is the "Come Away, Human Child, to the Water and the Wild." Absolutely, don't know if it's my favorite, but I love that song. That's the one that springs to mind.
I'm not going to ask you any more favorite questions then.
No, feel free. I'll just make stuff up.
What's your favorite color?
Favorite color? Green, definitely. All my life.
That was easy one.
Yeah. That you get asked that as a child, you see, so then you remember. So I've said green ever since I was little, so that's an easy one.
I've changed mine a few times.
Have you?
So,
what's your favorite color?
Well, green, but this is a tealy turquoise green. I also like the green, and I love purple. So
I've thought about changing my favorite color to brown. I nearly did. I was walking through the woods near me, and everything was brown, and I just suddenly noticed how many different colors of brown, and how eventually everything ends up brown, and that actually all the colors want to become brown eventually. And I thought maybe actually all the colors are just being colors until they get a chance to become brown.
That's a
I thought
really interesting.
maybe brown is the ultimate color for everything. So maybe one day my favorite color will be brown.
That's an interesting one, because yeah, you're right. Everything does go brown. So there's colors that I have that are favorite that I like to wear. But if I'm out in the landscape, my eyes look for green. And I remember flying back from, I lived in Lesotho in Southern Africa, and I was there in our summer, but their winter, and everything is brown. So I don't play golf, but there was a golf course there, and they played on the browns, not on the greens. And I remember flying into Dublin Airport and looking out the window and seeing everything green, having had 3 months of everything brown, and my eyes were just soaking it up. And I find that really healing to be able to absorb that, and then I'm well. So I'm still a green person, I think.
Yeah, no, me too. You've persuaded me. I'll stick with green.
But remember, when brown comes, then green starts again. So, would you like to be buried, cremated, or excarnated? When you
cremated.
Okay.
Cremated. Ideally, in a forest on a big bonfire, but it's probably not legal in the UK.
And you might get down a lot of trees in the way on the way.
That's yeah. Well, do the health and safety risk assessment first.
Unfortunately, no. Everything has to be incinerated at the moment. It would be lovely to have the funeral that we would like. Not everybody can get that, and certainly not in these times, which is really, really sad. I was so grateful that Howard could have what he wanted. But just before we go, what is your favorite season?
Probably whichever season I'm in. If I'm honest, I at the moment I'd say autumn, but that's probably because that's where we're at just now. So I love the change of seasons. I think I get really excited when one season's going into the next. So at the moment, what I really love is when all the stars come back, and you don't have to, because in the summer you don't see, the stars are really faint. It never gets properly dark, certainly not up in Scotland. And so all the stars come back in autumn, and also the robins take over from the blackbirds. So in summer, the kind of background noise is kind of blackbirds to all the other birds, but they're kind of, and then there's a sudden point where suddenly the background noise is robins, and the blackbirds all pipe down. So they seem to have a point in the year when they sort of hand over to each other in terms of song. So we're at that point just now. The robins have started getting much louder, and the blackbirds are getting quieter, and I find that really exciting. So I like the change of seasons.
That's wonderful. I love this climate, and I love the fact that we have 4 seasons, and sometimes 4 one day, but have that variety. Okay, which is your favorite festival? Of the eightfold wheel of the year.
Probably Eimear. I love the kind of springs and waterfalls round about here, and kind of bridge it in the landscape. So definitely Eimear or Samhain. I'm not really choosing, am I? I really like the stories of Macha, and the kind of the Cailleach and the sort of crone season. So I also really like Samhain. So either end, they're my 2 favorite.
Wonderful. I have a commission for you. This is the last thing I'm going to say. From Marcia. Please write a poem titled "All the Stars Come Back in Autumn."
Okay, I will.
Well done. Thanks for that. So thank you for a lovely, inspiring, interesting conversation. Thank you for a very nice evening. So I think people have really enjoyed this. And I want to thank you, Peter. This has just been really, really enjoyable. And I had no idea where it was going or what kind of answers I was going to get. And it was just wonderful. And it was just showing your honesty and showing you for the wonderful person that you are.
Oh, it's such a delight talking to you, Eimear, and it always is. So that was the main reason I said yes, even though it was absolutely terrifying, just to have the chance and have a chat with you. So thank you so much.
Okay, so
everyone that's listening, that's amazing.
It's lovely to listen to these fireside chats. Thank you, Eimear, and thanks to Peter for the wonderful evening. Thank you. I'll just see a few more comments before we finish. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So nice that he says about the stars coming back in autumn and the blackbirds and robins. I hear the great tits so more now, and I love them. Wonderful indeed. Thank you for your great evening. Lovely fireside. Thoroughly enjoyed the evening. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been interesting. Lovely. So thank you, lovely person, Peter Cawston. Absolutely. I think you, Sean. That was wonderful. So, I'm Gura Mahagat. Falchirot. So thank you, everybody. I will be back here next Thursday with another guest, another member of the order that I hope you'll join us for what I imagine will be a very interesting conversation too. So Ihawa Aguiv Slán Gafoil. Until next week, I'm now going to try and do this.